Hello YouTube and welcome to an all new Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we're covering the main story and lore featured in the Elder Scrolls board game, which came out a while ago. Now here's the thing, the creators of the board game, Modiphius and Bethesda, had the awesome idea to give me a review copy of the board game so I could tell all of you about the story and lore added by it, which is all canon and approved by Bethesda themselves. Now, a link to the board game is in the description of this video if you want to check out the board game for yourself, but for now, let's first talk about what story is in there and talk about the game after talking about the story. So, the new board game is structured in two campaigns, one taking place 25 years before the events of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim the video game and in the final year of the Great War and the year after that, and a second campaign taking place during the beginning of Skyrim's Civil War, just before the events of the video game, and then a little bit during the events of the video game. Both campaigns follow the same set of characters who lived through these two events. Now, today we're talking about the first campaign, set during the final year of the Great War and a little bit after that. It begins with a prologue, which serves as the game's single-player tutorial. You play as the Khajiit Moiva Karnai, who is a servant of the Daedric Prince Mephala, and at the same time she's one of the secret operatives of the Thalmor working against the Blades organization, who at that time weren't outlawed yet, as the war was still going on and they were still fighting against the Thalmor and the Altmerry Dominion with the Empire. Now, Moiva Karnai mostly does Mephala's bidding in Skyrim by murdering people here and there, but sometimes gets orders by the Thalmor to track people down and kill or imprison them. Mostly these people are Blades, obviously. Now, during the prologue we get to see how Moiva gets urgent Thalmor orders that a group of Blades has entered Skyrim and that they need to be captured. Moiva can't ignore these Thalmor orders, even though she has an assignment by the Daedric Prince Mephala, so thus she stops listening to Mephala, angering the Daedric Prince in the process, who threatens Moiva that they'll find a new servant who will actually serve them. That's the setup for the main campaign, as the group of Blades in question are the players of the game, since this is basically a multiplayer game, although it is possible to play solo. Now, it's important to know that all these events that are following will take place at a time when the Reachmen, who would later come to be known as the Forsworn, took over the Reach in the city of Markarth under King Medanak and tried to form their own Reachman kingdom under the Empire, which would be independent from the province of Skyrim. This was known as the Markarth incident. Now, if you want to know more about that, there's a video in the description which you can watch on the subject to learn more. Now, at the time of the first chapter of the main campaign, you are introduced to your characters, all young Blades recruits whose units got decimated by the Thalmor on their first official mission in Cyrodiil during the final year of the Great War. You deserted to the north, to Skyrim, to escape the horrors of the final year of the Great War when the Thalmor were sending special units into enemy territory to combat and hunt the Blades down. When your group of basically Blades rookies and initiates enter Skyrim, you try to leave it all behind and start anew, trying to live normal lives with regular occupations. You all manage to settle in for a few weeks, you get jobs, buy houses, the works, but then suddenly everybody either gets kidnapped or mysteriously framed for crimes they didn't commit, or attacked out on the street, and each of the Blades gets in some form of trouble, but they manage to escape from their assailants, and they end up finding a note sent to these assailants. On the notes that they end up finding are their names and the names of other deserted Blades, and a message from Moiva Karnai with a bounty to be obtained by those who manage to dispose of the Blades on the notes. Now, the members of your group then start to investigate who Moiva Karnai is, what her goals are, and who she's affiliated with. The game provides multiple routes of investigation, so each member of the party can make at least a couple of solo choices, making for quite decent replay value, especially if you play a solo or duo campaign. Now, the investigation can take you anywhere, from trying to get help at the College of Winterhold to trying to get information from the Thieves Guild, which is pretty neat, as that way you have some role-playing options, especially in a solo or duo campaign, as you can decide not to take certain options which your character would never go for. Like, for example, if you play a morally good character, you might not want to, investigate with the help of the Thieves Guild. It's a pretty extensive investigation, but you learn in the end that Moiva Karnai is a Khajiit Thalmor operative in Skyrim. She was sent to the province from one of the Thalmor's main espionage headquarters from the city of Eldenroot in Valenwood, which is still the base of operations, which provides her with orders. One of her activities which you can uncover are leading the hunts for the Blades agents hiding out in Skyrim. Remember, at this time, during the final year of the Great War, the Thalmor embassy did not exist yet, so the hunting of Blades was still coordinated from the Dominion itself to field agents like Moiva. Other than that, you can also find that she has been paying the Blackblood Marauders, a group of pirates that we can find in the video game, to secretly smuggle Thalmor agents from Valenwood to Skyrim in order to be able to infiltrate the Empire from the back, so to speak. And you can also find out that she tries to influence the Khajiit caravans that are treading through Skyrim. She's trying to bribe them to be her eyes and ears, although those caravans are often not very sympathetic to the Thalmor, and they refuse to help her once they find out that she is with them. When you've gathered all this evidence, your group decides to go and inform High King Islot, who is Torik's father, that the Thalmor are operating in his kingdom and that you found evidence which can be used to round up the Thalmor network. Remember, this was all during the Great War, when the Empire and the Dominion were still at war, so the Thalmor had no legal reason whatsoever to be in Skyrim. They were the enemy at that time, so that's why they want to inform the High King. So the group then travels to Solitude to ask for an audience with the High King, but when you arrive and reveal your identities, the king lets you in, but immediately tells you that you need to flee, as the war just ended and the White Gold Concordat was signed, and that blades have been outlawed. So soon the Thalmor Justicars will be able to enter the province legally to hunt for blades agents. Not Talos worshippers yet, by the way, that will come later during the Skyrim Civil War. And when the Thalmor Justicars enter, the king warns you, you'd best be very far away from any city, as that's the first place that they will check. While the High King doesn't condone the secret Thalmor operations of Morva Karnai in Skyrim once you tell him about her, his first priority is to get you out of the palace, because out of respect for the legacy of the Blades, he gives you some supplies, but then immediately sends you on your way, trying to keep yourself out of the Thalmor's hands. And thus chapter 2 begins. This time your group of blades decides not to desert, but instead will try to save other known blades from the Thalmor Justicar's hands and try to find a safe haven somewhere, a place where you and your other blades will be protected from the Thalmor. The chapter starts with a description of events, saying how the Great War has ended and how Ulfric is rallying his militia to free Markarth from the Reachmen, as Jarl Hrolf of Markarth, the father of the Jarl that we meet in Skyrim, has promised to allow Talos worship once more in the Reach if Ulfric helps him get his city back. This is all part of that Markarth incident, of which we have a video in the description. Now, in terms of this game's story, you can go for several options in an attempt to find a safe haven for the Blades. You can either talk to a young Ulfric, who is on a march to Markarth with his militia and he's wandering across the entire board, on his way to liberate Markarth from the Reachmen and reinstate Nordic rule on behalf of the Jarl. You can speak to him as he travels with his army and ask him whether he can arrange that his father, Jarl Hoke Stormcloak, can provide a safe haven for the Blades in Eastmarch. You can also instead plead with King Medanek of the Reachmen to create a safe haven for the Blades in his new Reachman kingdom once the Empire recognizes it as a vassal. I mean, while we know now that Medanek was defeated by Ulfric in the Markarth incident, back then it wasn't all that certain that Ulfric would be able to overthrow Medanek, so it's a pretty solid plan to ask Medanek since he's technically a new kingdom. And you can also, instead of going to those two options, try to ask some Daedric cults for protection, asking whether you can live with them in their Daedric cult hideout, but you know, that's basically for role-playing purposes if you decide to go that way. Now, in the end, none will or are able to help you, even though Medanek said he would, only to then send you on a quest which you have to complete first, and then when you're finished, then he still won't help you. Break. Anyway, both Ulfric and Medanek can in the end tell you that they have heard rumors of one of Skyrim's former Blades members having ratted out the other Blades by providing the Thalmor with a list of names of former Blades, among which were apparently your names. This Blade apparently did this to attempt to save their own skin. Your mission then changes, as if you would find a safe haven for former Blades, but then accidentally the rat would also be invited, well, let's just say that the Thalmor would knock on the door next and everybody would be dead anyway. So instead you now start an investigation into all the former Blades you know that are hanging out in Skyrim currently. Mainly semi-openly, as the Thalmor Justiciars haven't truly started their Blades hunts yet, and, you know, most people at the time don't really understand the severity of what's going to happen at that point. Anyway, when you start to investigate and talk to several former Blades, everybody will basically point fingers at each other, and it's up to you to decide who you think is most trustworthy and to pursue in your investigations. This is also the part where we meet the then Archmage of the College of Winterhold, Archmage Deneth. Now, I recently made a video on him which incorporates the new board game lore, and let's just say that he is quite the character and makes it significantly harder for you to enter the college to speak to a former Blade who's hiding in there. Link to that is in the description if you want to learn more. Now, That being said, eventually while rummaging through the belongings of one of the former blades, you will find that one of the former blades has recently received a suspicious letter with an old blade secret code on it and a cryptic message saying that the Grand Master would like to meet with them in some cave near Solitude. When I read this, I thought it was a pretty obvious trap, but the blade you were investigating actually fell for it and decided to go, so you chase after them. But you're too late and you arrive at the cave, and all that you find are all the blades that you've been investigating, but then dead. Except one, whose body is not among the dead. The pretty obvious conclusion is that the person who is missing from the body pile is the rat. Now, in my game it was a guy named Carillion, who you can funnily enough also find out that he's in love with a vampire at that time. I mean, aren't we all in some way? But apparently it doesn't have to be Carillion who's the traitor, as I found several cards where Carillion was dead and another former blade was the traitor. So for replayability it's possible to find out that it was apparently a different blade, although it might also be cut content which they just left in there as a card that would never be pulled, as I could not find out for the life of me how to get one of the others to be the traitor despite simulating the story 3 times. Anyhow, that's where chapter 2 ends, as now you're the only remaining Blades members that you know of in Skyrim, as all others were killed by the traitor Carillion. So instead of finding a safe haven, you decide to pursue Moiva Karnai and the traitor and put them down before you can find peace and a life in hiding. At the start of chapter 3, you find out that Markarth has now fallen. Ulfric Stormcloak and his militia have thrown over High King Medanek and his Reachman rule and reinstated Jarl Hrolfdir of Markarth to power in exchange for Jarl Hrolfdir going against the White Gold Concordat, which was the treaty which ended the Great War, and promising Ulfric to reinstate Talos worship in the Reach and providing a safe haven for worshippers there. But the Thalmor find out, and they pressure the Emperor to put a stop to the Talos worship in the Reach and arrest Ulfric. So either enforce the White Gold Concordat treaty yourself, or let the Dominion armies in and let them besiege Markarth and have them enforce the White Gold Concordat for you. The Emperor, not wanting Dominion armies in Skyrim, decides to act himself. Ulfric is arrested and Jarl Hrolfdir is pressured to relinquish the freedom of worship of Talos in the Reach. This is the backdrop of the story of chapter 3, as you and your party members start the pursuit of Morva Karnai and the Blade's traitor, but to be fair, you have very little leads as to where any of them could be. Fortunately, this is the moment where you're contacted by the Daedric Prince Mephala. Remember, Daedric Prince Mephala was betrayed by Morva Karnai at the start of the story, during the prologue. Now, Mephala saw that you were aiming to kill Moiva and thus decided to, let's say, help you out by telling you that the Dark Brotherhood just so happens to be able to help you on your quest to kill her. Now, Mephala tells you that there's a Dark Brotherhood contract out there on Jarl Hrolfdir of Markarth, and that if you kill him before the Brotherhood does, you might be able to gain their trust or at least get information from them. This is once more a point where there's quite some player choice, as you can decide to, if you don't like Daedra, you can just, ignore Mephala and try other avenues, like try asking around or sneaking around for clues in Markarth, as you try to find out why the Jarl got a Dark Brotherhood contract on his head and who wants him dead. During this investigation you can actually meet a young mule, the Lioness, who can help you out in your quest and also become a follower for in the game. It's also possible to meet Nelacar, who we meet in Skyrim in the video game, and ask him for help. He can help you out and try to beat Mephala at her own game by invading her realm. Now, another possibility is to search around Skyrim for clues, where you will actually be able to visit Rorikstead as it's being built and meet Rorik and Juan as they just got back from the Great War. That part of the questline even lets you go on this little detour side quest of helping build new houses in Rorikstead and trying to find a young Lokir, the guy who we see in the beginning of Skyrim the video game, who is a horse thief, who in this game has taken an unauthorized joyride on his father's horse, and you have to bring him back. After helping out the town, you can find that Moiva Karnai has been there at some point, as he traveled across the province, and people can give you some clues. You can also try to use the Dark Brotherhood in a different way, if you don't want to join them or help them, by trying to put a contract on Moiva Karnai's head, which obviously does not work out. Life is never that easy. Or finally you can choose to go to the College of Winterhold and see if the mages can help you out. Then you once more meet with Archmage Denneth, who absolutely refuses to help you once you tell him that a Daedric Prince contacted you, as he gets scared of the Daedric Prince apparently, and then tries to get rid of you by letting you do some really hard tasks, which are really hard dice rolls in the game, and then when you succeed, it's clear that he never really expected you to, be able to succeed, and then he tries to get rid of you again by giving you completely different information than the information that you were looking for. Archmage Denneth is probably my favorite addition to the game. He existed in lore before, and the creators of the board game have given him a pretty hilarious personality, and I love Denneth for it. Like I said before, I created a full video on him and his antics from both the established video game lore and the board game lore, and I can really recommend watching that video. Link is in the description. Anyway, while all these options add replayability and player choice to the game, I think a lot of people would do as the Daedric Prince commands and kill Jarl Hrolfdir while he's out on a diplomatic mission with the Reachman, now called the Forsworn. In the video game, the Forsworn are blamed for the Jarl's death. They are blamed that they killed him as he came to negotiate with them. But here it's revealed that it was the player of the board game that killed him and framed the Forsworn for the murder. Or if you did not end up listening to Mephala, the Dark Brotherhood carried out the contract and framed the Forsworn eventually. Now, funnily enough, I've been in contact with the writers and I asked them who actually put that contract on the Jarl's head. If the Forsworn did not want to kill him, who would benefit of the Jarl's death? And the writers told me that Bethesda did not allow them to tell me, as they are only allowed to talk about what's in the board game, as that's what Bethesda cleared them to talk about. So that's interesting, but that does make me think who could have been the one to put the contract on the Jarl's head. My personal suspicions are either the people from Ulfric's militia wanting revenge for promising Talos worship and then helping the Empire arrest Ulfric and then forbid Talos worship anyway, obviously making the people that fought with Ulfric pretty angry. Or perhaps, in my opinion, it could have been the Thalmor who knew that the Markarth incident caused quite a lot of chaos in Skyrim and then put pressure on the Emperor to have Ulfric arrested and then wanted to make an unstable situation even more unstable in the Reach to give the Empire another internal conflict, just as they tried to keep the civil war in Skyrim going in the later timeline. But I personally lean towards the Ulfric militia theory, as the Thalmor don't seem to use the Dark Brotherhood and rather send their own assassins. So yeah, do let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, the Dark Brotherhood avenue, just like all other options that you can tackle in the investigation, can help you find out that Moiva Karnai has her base of operations in a large manor house on an estate close to Dragon's Bridge. So you and your fellow blades then gather for an assault on the manor, and depending on which route you took, you may have followers at this point, depending on who you helped. For example, you can have followers like Mjol the Lioness, Juan from Rorikstead, or Runil, the priest that we meet in Falkreath in Skyrim, as he is semi-involved in the Dark Brotherhood series of investigations here in this game. You can also have several potential other advantages, depending on which people you helped along the way, like strong spells taught to you at the College of Winterhold. But long story short, you and your party then suit up and make yourselves ready to assault Moiva's manor. Now, when you arrive there, you find Moiva Karnai guarded by 2 Thalmor agents and the traitor blade Carillion. Now, let me tell you, this fight was hard. I did the story solo, but with 2 characters to make it a bit easier. Both were quite leveled and I only finished it with 1 sliver of health left, and one of my characters passed out in the dirt an inch away from death. So seriously, bring some friends for this fight, or followers, and the best gear that you can manage, as you will need it for this fight. So, now Moiva's Thalmor guards are dealt with, and the traitor Carillion lies dead and bleeding on the floor, but Moiva Karnai, disarmed and bleeding, still lives. She then begs for her life, begging you to spare her, promising that she will become your spy in the Thalmor ranks and keep them off your trail if you spare her. Now, the Daedric Prince Mephala will then speak to you, commanding you to kill Moiva Karnai for her betrayal, threatening that if you don't kill her, you will become the Daedric Prince's next target. But, you know, despite Mephala's insistence, sparing Moiva Karnai, even if you don't like her, is just the best possible option, as if you don't spare her, you get an ending where you and your party survive it all, but the Thalmor, out of revenge for losing their main asset in Skyrim to some former blades, intensify their search for other blades across the continent, hunting down almost every blade in the province of Skyrim and other provinces which hadn't been hunted down yet, and are ever on the search to get you and your companions, meaning that you will be on the run permanently, while haunted by the nightmares of dying blades you could not save. Meanwhile, since you listen to Mephala in the end, you have to do Mephala's bidding all the time, so you have to kill people here and there, and you're on the run and slave to a Daedric Prince, since if you disobey Mephala, just like Moiva Karnai did, you know, if you decide not to kill someone in her name, then Mephala will, you know, send someone to kill you. Perhaps even contact the Thalmor hunting you, just like the Daedric Prince contacted you when Moiva disobeyed the Daedric Prince. So, if you spare Moiva, you get a far better ending, as Moiva keeps her promise and makes sure that many surviving blades keep out of the clutches of the Thalmor, and spies on the Thalmor on your behalf. You get to read how many ex-blades live happy normal lives in exile, but there's still a factor of having disobeyed Mephala, and the fact that Mephala might still send someone to kill you eventually as you did, disobeyed them. But it's still the far superior ending, since the blades you saved may help you with counteracting Mafala's servants. Now, this campaign ends with that you and your party members lead happy lives in exile after the campaign. You buy houses, start families, start businesses, etc. But here's the interesting thing: if you ended up sparing Moiva, the next campaign of the game, a new original story played during the Civil Wars and 25 years after this story, will actually start differently, as even 25 years later Moiva Karnai is still helping you, and the game starts with her warning you of the impending danger. That's basically the main thing in the second campaign, and you can also get her as a follower to aid you in that campaign. So honestly, sparing Moiva is just the best idea in my opinion. That said, that is the first main story of the Elder Scrolls board game by Modiphius. There's a whole second campaign and a vampire hunting campaign available, and much more new story to discover, so I highly recommend you give it a look. The link to that is in the description. The game was quite fun to play, and it can be, just played solo for the story, although it's a bit more fun with friends probably, and it's a bit easier with friends, as some fights are pretty hard to pull off alone, and I can very much recommend checking the game out. It's in the description. I will make sure that I will make some more videos on what the game added. Like I said, I already made one on the Archmage Deneth of the College of Winterhold, and the link to that is also in the description. I will also try to make a new video on the Markarth incident with all the new information that we got, and it will replace the old one in the description once I made it. Like I said in the video on Archmage Deneth, I can really appreciate Modiphius and Bethesda actually delving into the lore, expanding what we have on some obscure topics that we only heard about once or twice in the past, instead of just, filling it with all sorts of fan service which really doesn't make any sense. The lore in this thing actually makes sense. Now, if you want to try the board game for yourself, I put a link to the page of the board game in the description, and also put a link to my video where I interviewed the lead writer of the game on their lore choices and the relationship with Bethesda Game Studios while writing it, where he revealed that Bethesda approved and gave feedback on everything, which is why I consider the game personally to be canon. That said, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Huge thanks to Modiphius and Bethesda for giving me the opportunity to cover the lore by providing a review copy. Now, if you learned something in this video, be sure to return for the next Elder Scrolls lore video, probably next week or the week after. And now all that rests me is to vocally thank my top Patreon supporters: Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Polaris Putin, Athena Hayodis, King Chris, Bolge, Scrap of the Scrolls, Doji, Fenrir, Sort of Bushido, Rakai, Zarmikal, and Mr. Christmas. It's thanks to these people and all the others on screen that this channel stays alive, and for that I'm very grateful. That said, I hope to see all of you in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Bye bye.